Welcome to the Get a Life podcast. Explore survivor stories. Uncover the hidden truths. Join our X-Call conversations. You matter, and so does your story. Hi everyone, welcome back to Get a Life podcast. I am Cheryl, and with me today is Richard Marsh. We are both ex-members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, formerly known as the Exclusive Brethren. Today we bring you the long-awaited documentary of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church charity, the Rapid Relief Team. We are going to dive right into this and explain to you today what is really under their red tent. Chapter 1, Volcano.
On the 9th of April 2021, La Soufriere volcano in the Caribbean island of St. Vincent erupted explosively. 16,000 people were evacuated from the northern third of the island as heavy ashfall covered houses and farmland. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's disaster relief charity, the Rapid Relief Team, swung into action. Here's an article from Searchlight, the St. Vincent newspaper, from June the 15th, 2021.
Police receive more supplies from Rapid Relief Team. On Wednesday, June 23rd, Kenley Ward, team leader of the Rapid Relief Team, handed over 25 food boxes and 10 boxes containing baby essential items to Commissioner of Police Colin John at the Central Police Station. A release from the RSVGPF states, during the handing over ceremony, Ward said that his organization is a Christian-based organization that expresses care and compassion through donations made to disadvantaged persons. He mentioned that since the eruption of the volcano, his organization donated over 16,238 food boxes and 14,000 bottles of water to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Here again, in the St. Vincent Times, the RRT make the same claim.
During the handing over ceremony, Mr. Ward stated that his organization is a Christian-based organization that expresses care and compassion through donations made to disadvantaged persons. He mentioned that since the eruption of the La Soufriere volcano, his organization donated over 16,238 food boxes and 14,000 bottles of water to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Donating 16,000 food boxes is very impressive. The RRT even commissioned a special banner to drape over the ship that delivered the supplies, just so there could be no doubt who had provided this bounty. The RRT's 2021 Year in Review video also highlighted the generous donation of thousands of RRT food boxes.
On the small island of St. Vincent, the La Soufriere volcano eruption sparked a mass evacuation. RRT volunteers from the Caribbean stepped in to help, donating thousands of RRT food boxes, essential care kits for babies, and water bottles to assist people impacted by this disaster.
But wait, there's more to this than meets the eye. Listen to this announcement by the St. Vincent government spokesman.
Social development. The government has been delivering boxes of non-perishable foodstuff and groceries to the private homes of hosts who have welcomed displaced friends and family, and sometimes even strangers. In this effort too, we have been significantly assisted by the non-governmental entities, most significantly the Rapid Relief Team of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. The supplementary budget includes $2.3 million to cover the purchase and delivery of 15,000 prepackaged boxes of foodstuff, which were prepared by the Rapid Relief Team. These food boxes, which contain over $150 worth of groceries, are currently being distributed under the leadership of the Honorable Minister for Social Development.
Out of the 16,000 food boxes that the RRT claimed to have donated, 15,000 were actually paid for and distributed by the government the St. Vincent Ministry of Social Development. And indeed, if we look on the government accounts, we find a purchase from the Rapid Relief Team on a single source contract valued at $2,200,289 East Caribbean dollars, which is just over 1.13 million Canadian dollars. But that's not all. The following newspaper articles show that in addition to the St. Vincent government funding and distributing 15,000 of the boxes, the Rapid Relief Team also received 50,000 Canadian dollars from the government of Canada.
The St. Vincent volcano hasn't exploded since last week, but need is dire. This is in the News Americas, New York, Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. The St. Vincent and the Grenadines La Soufriere volcano has not exploded since April 22nd, 2021, even though it is still erupting according to seismologists, and the situation and needs remain dire. Donations and aid is starting to trickle in as the country's government says losses from the eruption could mount into hundreds of millions. On Monday, both Norway and Canada added to a small group of nations that have pitched in. And the government of Canada has pledged $440,000 in immediate relief funding provided through Global Affairs Canada. The emergency relief funding will focus on the basic needs of displaced persons, including those in shelters, with a contribution of $50,000 to support the work of Rapid Relief Team.
While the Rapid Relief Team doubtless made some contribution to disaster relief after the eruption, their claim to have donated over 16,000 food boxes is clearly false. Over 90% of these boxes were paid for by the government of St. Vincent, plus they had $50,000 from the government of Canada. However, when we look at the RRT's Canadian website, we find the statement, RRT does not receive government funding.
So on their website, this is what it says. RRT doesn't receive government funding. So the tangible support we provide both locally and globally wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of our compassionate sponsors.
The RRT website also contains their vision statement.
And it says on here, our vision for the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church to express Christian principles of care and compassion by way of benevolent relief to people in need.
While we don't want to discredit the work that the RRT did do after the eruption, it is very clear that they have shamelessly concealed from the press and the public the fact that the vast majority of the RRT food boxes were not donated by the generosity of PBCC donors, but by the governments of St. Vincent and of Canada. We have to ask the question, isn't honesty also a Christian principle that the PBCC should express?
Chapter 2, Why Disaster Relief?
Why does the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church run a disaster relief charity? And why would they lie so egregiously about its accomplishments? To understand that, let's take a diversion and look at the history of another highly controversial church and its disaster relief charity, the Church of Scientology, and its volunteer ministers' disaster response team. The story starts at number 666 East Avenue, Bay Head, New Jersey. This is the house where, in 1950, occultist and pulp fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard invented a new pseudoscientific psychotherapy method that he called Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. Dianetics became an instant fad and made Hubbard famous. Around 500 Dianetics groups sprang up around the USA, but success was short-lived. Dianetics was condemned by real psychologists as snake oil and quackery, and its practitioners were prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license. By 1953, Hubbard was near bankrupt, and Dianetics seemed to be history. Then L. Ron Hubbard had a brilliant inspiration. What if he reframed Dianetics as a religion? Not only could he sell his snake oil without medical qualifications, but the whole business would be tax exempt. In 1954, Hubbard moved to cult-friendly Los Angeles and relaunched Dianetics as the Church of Scientology, complete with a prominent Christian cross as its symbol, despite it being neither Christian or a church. The makeover was a success. Tax exempt, the Church of Scientology became immensely profitable, and L. Ron Hubbard became extremely wealthy. However, in 1967, the IRS, the USA Tax Authority, revoked Scientology's tax-exempt status, stating that it was operating as a business rather than a church, and that L. Ron Hubbard was personally profiting.
Okay, so this is the news articles. IRS investigates Scientology as business.
This loss of charitable status would cost the Scientologists about $20 million per year, and L. Ron Hubbard fought a ruthless, no-holds-barred pressure campaign against the IRS. In a conflict that lasted for 25 years, Scientology members were mobilized to intensively lobby politicians and to harass and intimidate IRS officials. It was not enough. In order to regain their charitable status, the Church of Scientology would have to prove that they operated for the public benefit, not just for their own financial gain. So, in the early 90s, an obscure recruitment initiative of the church was reinvented as a high-visibility disaster relief charity, the Scientology Volunteer Ministers Disaster Response Team. Despite the volunteer ministers only being a tiny part of the huge Scientology organization, this token appearance of charity gave the harassed IRS some tangible evidence on which to hang a case for granting Scientologists charitable status. In October 1993, the US Internal Revenue Service recognized Scientology as an organization operated for religious and charitable purposes and gave it full tax exemption.
This is in the New York Times. 12.5 million deal with IRS lifted cloud over Scientologists. The Church of Scientology paid $12.5 million to the federal government in 1993 as part of a settlement with the Internal Revenue Service that granted tax-exempt status to the church and ended a long and bitter battle with the agency.
Let's do a quick summary of the tactics used by the Scientologists over the years to gain their valuable tax-free charitable status. 1. They rebranded Scientology as a Christian church. 2. They intensively lobbied politicians. 3. They stalked and harassed IRS officials. And 4. Finally, they set up a highly visible disaster relief charity to give the impression that the Church of Scientology operates for the public benefit rather than being a private club or business. So how does this connect with the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and its Rapid Relief Team? The group now known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is, in fact, the same organization long recognized as the Exclusive Brethren, a name associated with controversy and secrecy. They changed their name in 2012, but before we dive into why, let's take a quick look at the origins. The Exclusive Brethren emerged in 1848 following a split within the broader Plymouth Brethren movement. They're a deeply fundamentalist and insular sect shaped by their own interpretation of the Bible. Key to their belief system is the idea that the world is inherently evil and that true believers must remain completely separate from it. Their radical reading of the book of Revelation leads them to see the world as doomed and beyond saving, so much so that they believe efforts to improve it are both futile and wrong. As a result, the group has historically opposed any form of charitable work outside of their own community. For 160 years, from 1848 right through to 2008, the exclusive brethren not only refused to run or support public charities, but they also discouraged individual members from participating in any external charitable activity. Things changed in 2008 when UK charity law was reformed. Previously, religious groups were automatically granted charitable tax exemptions, but under the new law, that exemption would only be available to organisations that demonstrated a clear public benefit. Simply being a religion was no longer enough. All religious organisations were now required to register with the Charity Commission to maintain their tax-exempt status. When the exclusive brethren applied, their application was denied.
So this is in the Daily Mail. So much for Christian charity. Plymouth Brethren lose battle for tax relief because they're doing no public good.
This was a major financial crisis. With about 16,000 members and over 300 gospel halls in the UK alone, the Brethren suddenly faced an annual tax bill of £13 million. And if the UK Brethren lost their charitable status, it would surely trigger other governments around the globe to take the same measures. The wealthy Brethren congregations in Australia, New Zealand, North America, and Europe might well also become liable for tax on their property and income. A tax bill that in 2008 might have been around £40 million globally. Interestingly, the exclusive brethren found themselves in the same predicament that the Church of Scientology had decades earlier, and they responded with a remarkably similar strategy to try and win back their charitable status. Here's what they did next. 1. They rebranded themselves from Exclusive Brethren to Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. 2. They intensively lobbied politicians.
Leaked documents obtained by the Times laid bare the extraordinary lobbying campaign waged by the Brethren to win political support and overturn a decision in June 2012 to refuse charitable status to one of its gospel halls.
3. They stalked and harassed Charity Commission officials.
And this is from the third sector. Brethren members followed Charity Commission officials during Preston Down Trust dispute. The regulators has revealed that it received more than 3,000 letters from members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church and 200 from MPs after initially refusing charitable status to the trust.
4. And most importantly, they set up a highly visible disaster relief charity to give the impression that the exclusive brethren operate for the public benefit rather than being a private club or business. Unfortunately for the PBCC, there was a mole present at the London campaign headquarters where senior Brethren members such as Garth Christie and Bruce Hazel were rallying the troops against the Charity Commission's ruling. Leaked documents supplied to the Times led to this highly embarrassing article, which shows a side of the Brethren that is neither charitable nor compassionate.
And the title says, Extreme Sect Secures £13 million Tax Breaks. Leaked documents obtained by the Times lay bare the extraordinary lobbying campaign waged by the Brethren to win political support and overturn a decision in June 2012 to refuse charitable status to one of its gospel halls. Mr. Hales ordered elders to go for the jugular, go for the underbelly, referring to the Charity Commission to halt an appeal case which would have allowed former members to testify. That's in hand, a senior elder replied.
Charity Commission officials were followed to unrelated events by Brethren members, pressured by supportive ministers and MPs, and had their offices deluged with more than 3,000 letters from adherents. One Brethren member prepared a draft presentation showing a photograph of a car being crushed by a brick wall, accompanied with the words, "This must be our aim, no mercy, nothing else will do."
More than 200 MPs, many of whom had been persuaded that the Brethren were an innocuous Christian church, wrote to the regulator on its behalf and several tabled supportive motions, organized debates, and hosted parliamentary events. The MP for Wellingborough, who is one of the Brethren's strongest supporters, assured the sect, "Your wish is my command."
Let's put the Scientology campaign and the Exclusive Brethren campaign side by side and see how they compare. Comparison of tactics, Scientology versus Exclusive Brethren. Scientology, rebranding, rebranded itself as a Christian church. Exclusive Brethren, rebranding, rebranded themselves as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Scientology, political influence, intensive lobbying of politicians. Exclusive Brethren, political influence, intensive lobbying of politicians. Scientology, harassment of authorities, stalking and harassment of IRS officials. Exclusive Brethren, harassment of authorities, stalking and harassment of Charity Commission officials. Scientology, public image strategy, set up a highly visible disaster relief charity, the Volunteer Ministers. Exclusive Brethren, public image strategy, set up a highly visible disaster relief charity, Rapid Relief Team. Now let's take a visual look at just how similar Scientology's Volunteer Minister Disaster Response Team and the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's Rapid Relief Team really are. Both the Scientologists and the Plymouth Brethren's Rapid Relief Teams approach charity with the same unmistakable formula: maximum visibility. They set up eye-catching marquees, wear matching high-visibility uniforms, and plaster their logos and slogans across every available surface, front, back, and sides. So why the flashy outfits? And why, out of all the possible charitable causes, food banks, refugee support, educational grants, did both groups settle on disaster relief as their signature activity? The answer is simple: publicity. Disasters are media magnets. Wherever there's a crisis, you'll find journalists, photographers, TV crews, and global news coverage. If your true goal is maximum exposure rather than maximum public benefit, then disaster relief gives you the best return on investment. It's the cheapest way to appear charitable on the world stage. To understand just how crucial the Rapid Relief Team was to the PBCC's campaign to regain tax-exempt status, let's walk through the timeline. 2008, a change in UK charity law required all religious charities to demonstrate a public benefit in order to qualify for tax exemption. Simply being a religion was no longer enough. 2012, the PBCC's application to renew its charitable status was denied. The reason? The funds it collected were used exclusively for the benefit of its own members, offering no benefit whatever to the general public. February 2013, the first version of the RRT appeared, then called the Rapid Response Team, when it served refreshments to firefighters responding to a blaze in Liverpool. May 2013, the Rapid Relief Team was officially launched on the Brethren's newly branded website. A blog post announced it with stunning dishonesty. Members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, since its earliest days, have been involved in supporting and serving local communities. The Rapid Relief Team, RRT, has been formed by the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, PBCC, to more efficiently coordinate support for local communities globally. October 2013, the RRT launched its own dedicated website, www.rapidreliefteam.org, featuring articles about its activities in the UK, Australia, and the Caribbean. In January 2014, the UK Charity Commission agreed to grant tax-exempt status to all PBCC-affiliated trusts and charities, but only under strict conditions. The PBCC was required to sign a legal undertaking pledging to use its time, talents, and money to assist those in need in the wider community insofar as reasonable. In the Commission's 55-page report on the decision, they noted, the PBCC have recently started to engage with the wider community and that they undertook disaster relief work, assisted those in need, and donated to charity. The report concluded that there was some beneficial impact on the wider community through the encouragement of charitable giving and living out Christian beliefs in the community, including through disaster relief. In summary, after a bitter 5-year struggle, in which the PBCC reportedly spent over $2 million on PR consultants, legal fees and lobbying, they were finally granted tax-exempt status worth at least £13 million per year. And this only happened because, for the first time in their 160-year history, the UK government forced them to create a charity that actually benefited the public rather than serving only themselves.
Chapter 3. Garth and Bruce go to Westminster.
We have made an extraordinary claim in the previous chapter, the claim that for 160 years the exclusive Brethren sect had never committed a single act of public charity. Does that sound like a fair or balanced appraisal? Shouldn't we give the PBCC an opportunity to give their side of the story and to explain themselves? That is exactly what we're going to do. In October 2012, with the assistance of some of their Conservative MP friends, the Brethren were invited to present their case to the Public Administration Select Committee, an influential parliamentary committee of MPs that meets in the UK Houses of Parliament. Here's the page of the UK government website where the transcript is recorded. There will be a link to this below the video. Prominent UK Brethren leaders Garth Christie of Leeds and Bruce Hazel of London were chosen to represent the PBCC. As an official part of parliamentary procedure, the committee meeting was televised, and we will show you some clips.
You want charitable status so much? What does it matter?
We've always had it.
Yes, but what advantage is it?
All sorts of advantages.
Could you list them? Because we just heard from the public schools man that there were no financial advantage to charitable status. I'm perplexed by that answer.
Well, certainly.
You would see it as a financial advantage, do you?
Certainly. One of the things that is a help to us is the financial advantage of being a charity. There's no denying that. And members put in tax money. As believers on the Lord Jesus, we're totally righteous in our business affairs. We don't evade tax and that sort of thing. So we declare what we earn, and then we take advantage of the gift aid provisions that the government has set up to encourage charities to fund our churches and to fund the good works that we then go out to into the wider community.
Let's just repeat that one line. As believers in the Lord Jesus, we are totally righteous in our business affairs. We do not evade tax and that sort of thing. Keep that statement in mind as we go through the podcast. Back to the Parliamentary Committee.
The question is whether you, as an organisation, act in the public benefit. Can you give an example of how your organisation acts in the public benefit?
Well, the provision of
which you feel that the Charities Commission have ignored.
Very good, Mr. Jenkins. The provision of meeting rooms and gospel halls, which are places of public worship. They are open to the public. And we distribute gospel tracts and Christian literature. We have regular street preachings in towns and cities throughout the UK. There are over 500 street preachings each week with 1,800 preachers, and 30,000 gospel tracts are given away every week across the UK. There's maintenance and support of families and care for young people, care for old and disabled people, visiting old people's homes and nursing homes. And there's employment of 4,500 non-brethren. And then we'd open our hall in London. We've opened it twice for people to come in. The first time there was over 400 Bibles given away, over 200 people came. The second time there was 160 people, where there was hot food and drinks, free Bibles and gospel booklets. And
It could be argued, Mr. Hazel, that the Conservative Party also does this sort of thing.
Yes.
That we care about old people, we visit old people's homes, we disseminate literature about the Conservative Party, we think the Conservative Party is a good organisation, but it doesn't make us a charity.
No.
So what is the point that the Charities Commission is missing that makes you eligible as a charity?
If I'm quite...
The people that you visit in hospitals, are they members of your organisation, of the Brethren, or do you visit members of the general public?
That's a very interesting question, Mr. Flynn. We would visit members of the Brethren.
Let's break this down. The question was, what does the PBCC do as an organisation for the public benefit? Here's how Bruce Hazel answered. 1. They preach and hand out religious tracts. 2. They care for the old, young, and disabled, and they visit hospital patients. 3. They employ 4,500 non-brethren. 4. They opened their London hall twice and gave away free Bibles, food and drinks. Now let's unpack those claims. Point 1. Preaching and handing out tracts. Is that a charity? Promoting a religion that advocates chemical castration for gay men and bans university education isn't a public benefit, it's a public menace. Point 2. Caring for young, old and disabled people and visiting hospitals. Sounds good until you realise it's only for their members. No one outside the PBCC community receives this care. That's not a public benefit. Point 3. Employing 4,500 non-brethren. This is pure misdirection. The PBCC as an organisation doesn't employ anyone outside the sect. Yes, some PBCC-owned businesses might employ non-members, but that's business, not a public benefit. If hiring people made you a charity, then every supermarket, factory and tech company would be a charity. Point 4. Giving away Bibles and food at their London hall. Twice. Let's put this in context. Bruce Hazel is talking about 2 events over the entire 160-year history of the London Gospel Hall. That's not public benefit, that's damage control. This parliamentary hearing took place in October 2012. Just 5 months earlier, in June 2012, the UK Charity Commission refused charitable status to the PBCC. In the months that followed, the leadership scrambled to create a facade of charitable activity. I know this because I was there. I was inside the PBCC at the time. I helped organise it. The leadership issued instructions for each congregation to hold an event they dubbed a pie day. They would rent a marquee, set up tables, lay out food, hot drinks and free Bibles. They'd take out newspaper ads and distribute flyers to invite the public to what looked like a random act of generosity. But let's be honest, there's no such thing as a free lunch. These events weren't about giving, they were about the optics. They were staged to manufacture the appearance of public benefit, just in time for a charity appeal. The London Hall events Hazel referred to were simply 2 of these half-baked pie day stunts, amateur performances designed to mislead. Here's some photos from a pie day at the Colchester Gospel Hall. Over 2,000 flyers were distributed. About a dozen people showed up. It was snowing, it was freezing, but not a single attendee was allowed inside the Gospel Hall, despite repeated public claims by Hazel and Garth Christie that our halls are always open. Here is a comment from the PBCC website where these pictures were posted. AD says, seeing as it was so cold outside, why didn't you move inside to the presumably warming meeting hall? Wouldn't that have been nicer? Granny says, that might seem sensible, but the brethren jealously guard the sanctity of their gospel halls as places of worship only. They never eat meals in them, and there are no cooking facilities. Also, imagine having a barbecue indoors, in your lounge, say. Perhaps they could have left the barbecue outside, and brought the food inside, but they didn't think of that. So there you have it, Bruce Hazel's 4 great acts of public benefit presented to Parliament as justification for the Brethren's £13 million tax break. And what do they amount to? A great big nothing burger. As the committee hearing progressed, it seemed Bruce was starting to realise that his carefully prepared list hadn't landed the way he had hoped, and time was running out. Then just before the session ended, he blurted out this extraordinary final statement.
Could I just add to what Mr. Christie said, Chair? We referred to Mr. John Nelson Darby. He would have helped direct tens of thousands of francs to the Franco-Prussian War effort in 1870-1871. Brethren would have helped in the construction of Montgomery's caravan during the war. I've got a letter here from a member of the Brethren in 1957 that he distributed to all the through the inhabitants of Luton, inviting them to the preaching, which is what we do on every. We put contact details on the back of every gospel tract now, and that has really flowed right through to the present.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. Bruce gives us the whole history of every exclusive Brethren charitable act right back to their 1848 foundation to the present day. Let's go through them point by point. Point 1. John Nelson Darby would have helped direct tens of thousands of francs to the Franco-Prussian war effort in 1871. Whatever is he talking about? Bruce is actually referring to a letter of J.N. Darby's written in 1871 about the siege of Paris, an incident in the Franco-Prussian War. Here is the section of that letter he refers to.
London, March 1871. To Mr. P. Beloved brother, I have been happy to have your news thus about the brethren, and first of all of our dear brethren in France. God has kept them. He is always faithful. You will have known, as everybody, that there has been a second siege of Paris, the communists being in charge of the city. More serious evils than in the first siege have resulted. Battles, assaults delivered, than to hinder the progress of the troops. The city has been set on fire and also its surroundings. The public monuments burned. You probably know more than me, for I do not read the newspapers. This distracts me, and the world goes on its way whether I read them or do not read them. The brethren in Paris have continued their meetings and have been happy in spite of the difficulties of the times. Funds have been sent from England, Holland, Switzerland, and help has come to them, according to and in the measure of their needs, to the workers who were in debt, having lost work.
So all this is very generous, but it's all about brethren giving to other brethren. It's quite clear from the letter that the funds were sent to the brethren in Paris, not to the Franco-Prussian war effort, as Bruce Hazel claims. As we've seen before, the brethren's idea of charity is limited to helping themselves. Point 2. The brethren would have helped in the construction of Montgomery's caravan during the war. We're going to examine that claim in more detail using an article published on the Brethren's own website.
During the war in 1944, a man in business nearby named Mr. Larkin of the British Trailer Company Limited came to Mr. Bond after hearing that General Montgomery had no mobile office of his own in which to work. He proposed that he would give the trailer free if S.H. Bonds would construct a map office van to go on it, and it would be presented to the general as a gift for his own personal use. Mr. Bond readily agreed, and the map van was entirely designed and built by his workforce, who gave their time free for the purpose.
The Brethren member concerned was Mr. Bond. Mr. Larkin, not a Brethren member, provided the wheels and chassis. Mr. Bond's workforce, also presumably not Brethren, donated their time and labour. What then did Mr. Bond donate? Presumably a few £100 worth of timber, sheet steel and camouflage paint. A generous gift, but hardly sufficient to anchor the reputation of the exclusive Brethren as a significant public benefactor. And in any case, this was Mr. Bond personally making a donation to the war effort, this is not in any way a charitable act of the Exclusive Brethren as an organisation. And so onwards to Bruce Hazel's final point, point 3. I have a letter here from a member of the Brethren in 1957, distributed to the inhabitants of Luton, inviting them to the preaching. That's it. What can I say? I'm not sure how that proves that the Brethren are a charity. Knowing the Brethren as I do, I can't help suspecting that the extra numbers invited were there to help fill the collection plate, not to receive any blessing themselves. So to sum up, at the height of the Brethren's charitable status crisis, the two most senior PBCC members in the UK were invited to the Houses of Parliament to explain to a committee of MPs why the Brethren were a public benefit and should therefore have charitable status. Having scoured the whole 160-year history of the sect, all they could come up with is a small handful of lame and misleading incidents, all of which were either irrelevant or staged. It is very clear from the above why it became so urgent for the PBCC to set up a highly visible disaster relief charity in 2012. But before we move on, a digression. Let's take a closer look at these two prominent PBCC members who were chosen to represent the church before the government. Here is an article in the Tampa Bay Times, a Florida newspaper.
The title is Legality of Political Gift in Doubt by Lucy Morgan. The secretive religious group that spent more than $500,000 buying ads to support the candidacies of President Bush and U.S. Senator Mel Martinez may have violated federal election law by accepting a foreign contribution. A spokesman for the Federal Elections Commission says federal law prohibits foreign nationals from contributing money to buy ads in a federal election within 60 days of the election. The Thanksgiving 2004 committee was formed October 25th by a group of men who belong to the Exclusive Brethren, a religious group based in England and Australia. Many of the individual contributions came from people and businesses in the United States, but $377,000 of the more than $600,000 collected by the committee was contributed by a Brethren member in London who is a British citizen. The Brethren bought newspaper ads supporting the president in a number of U.S. papers and purchased an ad in the St. Petersburg Times supporting Martinez, but their religion prohibits voting or reading newspapers. The Thanksgiving 2004 committee raised the money from residents of 18 states plus $377,262 from Bruce Hazel of London, England. None of the money was raised in Florida, according to a report filed with the Federal Elections Commissions.
Hazel reached at his London office last week, said he is a member of the Brethren. He said the reasons he donated so much money to an American election committee were complicated and offered to explain later. When a reporter called him at the appointed hour, a secretary said Hazel just popped out and wouldn't be back until next week. He had to suddenly rush out, she said.
Yes, it's our familiar friend Bruce Hazel making an entirely illegal donation in an attempt to influence a US presidential election. Just one more incident in the long and troubled history of the Brethren's repeated efforts to illegally interfere in democratic elections, from the 2004 US election to their disastrous campaign for Australia's Liberal Party in 2025. But behind the headlines lies a far sadder truth about both Bruce Hazel and Garth Christie. They're not just defenders of the cult, they are profoundly victims of it. In 1972, when Garth Christie was just 15 years old, his parents were excommunicated. Garth and his brother Lance were immediately removed from their family home and placed in the care of Brethren families in Leeds to isolate them from the so-called corrupting influence of their parents. Their two younger siblings remained with the parents, permanently tearing the family in half. 30 years later, as Garth's parents lay dying, the Brethren in Leeds quietly admitted that they should never have been excommunicated. In 1976, the same tragedy repeated. Bruce Hazel was only 13 when his parents were withdrawn from, as the Brethren euphemistically call it. Bruce and his 4 siblings, Johnny, Jim, Ruth, and Becky, were all forcibly fostered out to Brethren families in London. Becky was just 9 years old. They would not see their parents again until 2005, nearly 30 years later, when the London Brethren decided to readmit them to fellowship.
Chapter 4, 160 Years of Selfishness.
We have established that the Brethren, throughout their history, have always had a profound antipathy to charity, and that the creation of the RRT in 2012 was forced on them by the UK government's refusal to continue their charitable status. But how can it be possible that a sect that has numbered between 10 and 20,000 people in the UK over a period of 6 or 7 generations can have absolutely no record of charitable deeds at all? Why, your average individual urban church with a membership of 100 or so is probably hosting, running, or supporting several worthwhile charitable causes or events every year. The answer is that the Brethren are not just indifferent to charity, they're actively and doctrinally opposed to it in principle.
Let's take a look at the history. When the Plymouth Brethren movement first emerged in the 1820s, it was marked by a remarkable openness and tolerance. People from nearly any Christian denomination were welcome to attend without needing to renounce their existing beliefs. In fact, the Brethren originally had their communion meetings on Mondays, specifically so members of other churches could still attend their own Sunday services. However, as the movement grew rapidly in size, this spirit of openness began to create internal tensions. The group eventually split into 2 opposing factions. One, led by J.N. Darby, pushed for a closed system governed by strict doctrinal conformity and centralized control. The other, led by George Muller, believed that each congregation should be self-governing and that the tolerance and open-minded spirit of the early Brethren should be valued and retained. But there was another important difference between the 2 factions, and that was their attitude to charity, or philanthropy, as it was called in those early Victorian days. George Muller, who led the open faction, was one of the greatest philanthropists of his day. Although not personally wealthy, through his lifetime he raised the equivalent of £13 million, with which he built 5 large orphanages in Bristol, each housing between 300 and 450 children. He also founded 117 schools, and by the time of his death it is reckoned that he had provided a home and education for over 10,000 orphaned children. J.N. Darby, who led the closed or exclusive faction, was the exact opposite. An aristocrat, born into a wealthy landowning family, he inherited 2 fortunes, one from his mother and the other from his father. On his father's side, the Darby fortune came from vast estates in Ireland, where a ruinous rent was collected from perhaps 3,000 tenants, peasant farmers who lived in extreme poverty and under constant threat of eviction from their hovels should they fail to make payment. On his mother's side, it was even worse. The Vaughans were slave owners with large and prosperous sugar plantations in Jamaica. An accounting of properties damaged by the Jamaican slave revolts of 1841 shows that the family owned 471 slaves on their Flamsteed and Vaughnsfield estates. The estates were managed by Darby's cousin, Samuel Vaughan Jr., on behalf of the family. How did Darby feel about this mass of impoverished humanity, peasants and slaves, on which his comfortable prosperity depended? Such a prolific author and writer of letters must have left some clues. In 1847, Ireland was struck by the Great Famine, when a blight wiped out the potato crop on which the peasants subsisted. It was a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions, over 1 million died of starvation and disease, while 2.5 to 3 million emigrated in a desperate search for employment and food. Of this immense tragedy in his home and native land, Darby wrote precisely nothing. In his 30 volumes of collected writings and around 1,500 letters, the great hunger of Ireland is not mentioned once. He did, however, have something to say about the Jamaican slaves, but it wasn't words of compassion, it was a complaint. In 1869 Darby visited the Caribbean, and on April the 20th wrote the following from Kingston, Jamaica.
The emancipation of the blacks had ruined the country, for they are not willing to work. In the French islands they are forced to work, and materially things go along better, but the English do not approve of this procedure.
The context of this letter is as follows. In 1834 the British government determined to rid the empire of the moral stain of slavery. To achieve this, they spent the equivalent over £20 billion to pay out the slave owners and thus emancipate the slaves. On the 16th of November 1835, the Vaughans of the Flamsteed estate received from the government a total of £4,870, 2 shillings and 7 pence, and their 286 slaves were liberated. J. Darby deeply disapproved of this remarkable act of charity, complaining that the emancipation of the slaves had ruined the country and presumably had a negative impact on his personal fortunes. Darby's profound indifference to the suffering of his fellow men did not stem from any personal meanness of spirit. He was notably generous to his brethren followers, but from a deep religious conviction that philanthropy was wrong. In another of his writings he scathingly dismisses philanthropy as an apron of fig leaves to hide from us the misery of our sins. Here is what he says.
As to the outside, the world goes on with its religion and its philanthropy. It does good, builds its hospitals, feeds the hungry, clothes the naked, and the like, but its inward springs of action are not Christ's. It seeks by law and efforts of philanthropy, individual and cooperative, to blot out the open effects of sin in the world. Such are the aprons of fig leaves, which remove nothing at all, but serve for the moment to hide from ourselves our nakedness and our misery, to avoid thinking of the justice of the condemnation God has put from the beginning on the sin that dwells in us.
Darby's understanding of the universe was breathtakingly simple. It had 2 parts. The good part consisted of God, the brethren, and J. Darby, and the bad part consisted of the world, the entire balance of humanity, and Satan who ruled over them. To Darby, the idea of giving anything to the world was anathema. The world was something that you took from, not something that you gave to. With such diametrically opposed views between its open and closed factions, schism was inevitable. In 1848 the brethren split in an acrimonious divorce that on some occasions degenerated into brawls and shouting matches in their meeting halls. The Darbyites closed ranks around their leader, turned their backs to the world, and so the exclusive brethren came into being. In 1869 the famous evangelist Charles Haddon Spurgeon penned this biting description of the brethren, which still perfectly describes them today.
Plymouth Brethren have no feeling wherever their principles are concerned. I know indeed of no sect or denomination so utterly devoid of kindness of heart. It is the most selfish religious system with which I am acquainted. It is entirely wrapped up in itself. Charles Haddon Spurgeon, June 1869.
We jump forward an entire century, from 1869 to 1969, and as far as charity is concerned, nothing has changed. Here is a copy of The Directives, a privately circulated list of all the rules laid down by the notorious James Taylor Jr., referred to here as Our Beloved, who was J.N. Darby's successor as universal leader of the exclusive brethren through the 1960s. The first directive of 1969 is, I do not give to charities, followed by an instruction on how many children brethren couples may conceive, and preceded by a ban on cameras for adults. Note that the directives are said to be the word of the lawgiver, which have come out in the temple, mysterious religious language designed to spread an aura of prophetic sanctity over the banal utterances of an alcoholic and a womanizer. This bizarre document bears a strong whiff of the cult, and that is exactly what the exclusive brethren had become. James Taylor Jr. was a close contemporary of L. Ron Hubbard and quite as eccentric and dangerous. He turned the straight-laced and deeply inhibited sect of J.N. Darby into a sexual circus of which he was the ringleader, commanding brethren women to sit on his lap in the front row of their meeting halls while he fondled their breasts before the assembled congregation. And let us remind ourselves here that the PBCC firmly remains a cult by any definition of that word, despite its feeble protests that it is really a deeply misunderstood mainstream Christian church. We have that on the authority of not one, but two Australian Prime Ministers. Firstly, Kevin Rudd, who in 2007 called them an extremist cult, and now in the spring of 2025, Anthony Albanese.
What we know is that they are combining with One Nation here and in other places, trying to do these preference deals. You have all sorts of strange occurrences with, a cult, the exclusive brethren, that they need to explain going forward. Where are all these people coming from? Why are they campaigning on booze? They don't vote, by the way, but they all of a sudden have found this enthusiasm in their hundreds to travel around the country to hand out how to vote. What's the quid pro quo there?
While James Taylor Jr.'s sexual exploits in the exclusive brethren soon passed, many other extreme and dangerous ideas he introduced did not, such as the cruel extremes to which he took the brethren's process of excommunication. Furthermore, rather than being merely indifferent to the world, successive leaders after James Taylor Jr. developed the theme of hating the world. In 2006, the current Brethren leader Bruce D. Hales proclaimed, "We have to get a hatred, an utter hatred of the world." With this hatred came a profound sense among the Brethren of their own almost infinite superiority to other men, and a sense of entitlement to the very best things that the world enjoyed. This culminated in the following chilling quotes of Bruce D. Hales, printed and distributed as the word of the lawgiver to every PBCC member worldwide.
The world is there for our using up of it. That's the way I look at it. The world is there to take what we want from it and leave everything we don't want. Spoil the Egyptians as quick and as fast as you can and leave them alone. And the next quote, we used to be exhorted when we were younger to spoil the Egyptians. That means you charge the highest possible price to the worldly people. That's the way to get ahead. I mean, materially, you've got to spoil the Egyptians. It doesn't belong to them anyhow, so we've just got to relieve them of it. Got to do it astutely and carefully. Both quotes are copyright Bible and Gospel Trust.
The term Egyptians here is a kind of cultic slang, meaning anyone except the brethren. These ideas, deeply embedded in the brethren's psyche, are the real explanation for the ruthless, profoundly dishonest and sometimes criminal methods they employ to extract and cling to every dollar they can from the world. To them it is not theft or crime. They're simply taking what they're entitled to, relieving the wicked denizens of the world of money that doesn't belong to them anyhow.
Chapter 5. All gain, no pain.
Okay, so the exclusive brethren were a mean and tight-fisted bunch of introverts. So what? Now they have set up a genuinely public-facing charity, surely they have earned their tax-exempt status. What's your problem with that? The problem is this: fully 98% of the Brethren's tax-exempt or tax-refunded giving goes directly back to themselves, to their own numerous internal charities and trusts whose sole beneficiaries are Brethren members. Incredible as it sounds, less than 2% of the Brethren's charitable funds actually provide a public benefit, but that 2% guarantees the charitable status of the other 98%. As Garth Christie pointed out to the UK Parliamentary Committee, the real benefit of charitable status to the PBCC is the generous tax rebates that the governments grant to charitable giving. In the countries where the Brethren operate, governments typically give 25 to 30% tax rebate either to the charity or to the donor. Here's how it works in the UK. How gift aid works in the UK. When a taxpayer donates to a charity, the charity can claim an additional 25% from the government, so a £100 gift gains an extra £25. Now let's bend that blue arrow right round in a circle, so the donor and the recipient are the same person, like this. That's obviously illegal, right? You can't give money to yourself and expect the government to donate an extra 25%. But what if the donor/recipient is an organization, not an individual? If the donors are PBCC members and the recipients are PBCC charities, then the donor and recipient can both be part of the same organization, despite the fact that Brethren charities exist exclusively to benefit the donors. This was the situation up to 2012, when the government cancelled the Brethren's charitable status. The reason for the government's action? The PBCC was providing no public benefit. The Brethren's response was to set up a highly visible public benefit charity, the RRT, and to direct a portion of their donations to it like this. Despite its extremely high public profile, the RRT receives less than 2% of the Brethren's tax-exempt or tax-refunded giving. But by charity washing the whole PBCC organization, it guarantees the government's generous 25% rebate on the remaining 98%. Here's what it looks like in numbers. A PBCC member decides to donate £100 to charities. The government kicks in its 25%, giving a total of £125. Just £2.50 of that is directed to the RRT, and the remaining £122.50 goes right back into the PBCC system, where the donor ultimately becomes the beneficiary. The net worth of the PBCC has increased by 22.5% of the donation, all of which is a gift from the government of taxpayer money. In Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the USA, the rebate goes to the donor rather than to the recipient, but the net result is exactly the same. The PBCC net worth increases by about 25% of the donation value. If you're unfamiliar with the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, you might be confused by the idea that a donor and recipient could in effect be the same entity. To illustrate the contrast, consider a private individual who identifies as an Anglican. While they may attend services, they remain largely independent of the Church of England in their daily life. The PBCC is very different. It exercises an extraordinary level of centralized control over its members, extending not just to the congregations, but to individuals and even their workplaces. The level of oversight an adult Brethren member lives under is more akin to that of a protective parent managing the life of a 10-year-old child. For instance, adult members must obtain permission from church authorities to travel or spend even one night away from their local congregation. They need approval to move house, with the church determining both the location and type of home they're allowed to purchase. Marriage is also tightly controlled. Members must seek church permission and have their choice of partner approved. The influence doesn't stop there. Education is confined to church-run schools. Employment must be within Brethren-owned businesses. Even daily routines are regulated, where members shop, which phones and computers they use, and which parts of the internet they can access are all dictated by the church. Crucially, the church also oversees both the amount and destination of charitable donations made by members and by their businesses. In addition to the personal and business donations, large sums of money are also donated by weekly collections taken in each congregation. The distribution of these funds is dictated by a direct injunction from the Brethren's global leadership in Sydney, Australia. Each of the 300 or so congregations globally collects tens of thousands of pounds per year, all of which is distributed as tax-free gifts to prominent members of church leadership and to the church's numerous internal charities. In total, several million pounds per year, a large proportion of which is donated directly to PBCC leader Bruce D. Hales and his immediate family. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church operates a closed economic system, often referred to as the ecosystem, centrally coordinated by its business arm, Universal Business Team, or UBT. Within this system, nearly every product or service a PBCC member might need is provided by PBCC-affiliated entities, including supermarkets, Campus & Co., phones and mobile plans, IT support, health and business insurance, pension schemes, accounting services, travel agencies, clothing and furniture retailers, printers, music apps, funeral homes, and even cemeteries. Members are strongly encouraged to spend exclusively within this network. While income flows freely into the community through businesses that serve non-members, money rarely flows out. Instead, it recirculates through PBCC-run businesses, charities, and trusts. This creates a self-reinforcing economic loop, steadily growing the financial strength and net worth of the PBCC as a whole. A key feature of this ecosystem is the strategic use of charitable donations. Brethren individuals and businesses often donate within the system to PBCC-run charities and trusts. Because the UK government offers a 25% tax rebate on charitable donations, each transaction can generate a guaranteed financial return, effectively profiting from internal transfers while appearing charitable on paper. In short, this is not an open system designed for public benefit. It's a closed loop that concentrates wealth internally while leveraging public tax incentives to do so. The PBCC ecosystem, a closed economy of individuals, businesses, and charities that continually donates money to itself, gaining a 25% tax rebate from the government on each donation. How is this possible? Why hasn't the government made this arrangement illegal? The answer lies in assumptions that simply don't hold up in the case of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Government regulations around charitable donations are built on the expectation that charities, donors, and recipients operate at arm's length. For example, if a donor, a charity trustee, and a recipient were all close family members, this would typically raise a red flag due to the clear conflict of interest. However, the government has no mechanism for detecting the far more complex and systemic conflicts of interest that exist within a tightly controlled, high-demand group like the PBCC, a network of around 50,000 individuals, more than 600 charities and trusts, and over 3,000 affiliated businesses, all under centralized direction. In standard charity regulation, the government assumes the following. 1. That donations are voluntary, given freely by the donor. 2. That charities act in good faith to address real social needs. 3. That recipients are genuinely eligible for charitable support. But within the Brethren, these assumptions break down. The leadership can dictate how much a member should donate, and to which charity. They can instruct charities on how to allocate, invest, or redistribute those funds. They can even manufacture needs to justify where the money should go, all within the closed ecosystem. This extraordinary degree of central control allows the PBCC to exploit the charitable system in ways no regulator ever imagined, leveraging tax benefits and gift aid rules to cycle funds internally for their own strategic purposes. You may be wondering how the wealthy PBCC manages to find even marginally qualified causes for its internal charities to support. The answer is surprisingly simple. Firstly, One School Global. Until around 2018, most of the Brethren's internal charitable giving was directed to One School Global, the Brethren's private school network. With over 9,000 students, the schools were capable of absorbing large sums of money under the guise of education funding. However, since 2018, the PBCC's revenue, both from internal sources and government subsidies, has far outstripped the financial needs of its educational operations. So what happens to the surplus? The PBCC sequesters this excess through two primary methods. Firstly, accumulation across multiple trusts. The Brethren currently hold over 1.3 billion Australian dollars in its network of charitable trusts. Rather than dispersing these funds to legitimate charitable causes, the PBCC simply moves the money around. When any single trust accumulates enough to draw regulatory attention, the flow of funds is redirected to another trust. This tactic allows the PBCC to retain and grow its charitable assets without actually distributing them for the public benefit. Secondly, money laundering through charities. The second method is more concerning: complex money laundering schemes, which we've explored in detail before on the Get a Life podcast episodes, including
Episode 136,
How Bruce Hales Defrauds the UK Government, Episode 133, Vision Foundation $1 billion Fraud, Episode 94, One School Global Unispace Money Laundering Scandal, and Episode 97, Tax Fraud, Embezzlement, and the End of a Dynasty. These schemes typically fall into two categories. A. Trade-based money laundering, or TBML. PBCC charities purchase goods or services from PBCC businesses at inflated prices, effectively transferring funds from the charitable sector back into private Brethren-owned entities. B. Fake investments in Brethren businesses. PBCC trusts invest large sums in Brethren-owned businesses. These companies rarely return a meaningful profit to the trusts, making the investment function more like an interest-free loan, with charitable funds propping up private enterprises. So let's summarize. What is the role of the Rapid Relief Team in all of this? The RRT exists primarily to project an illusion of public benefit across the PBCC's entire charitable network. It acts as a false front, one that conceals the overwhelmingly self-serving nature of the ecosystem behind it. Here's the math. 98% of PBCC tax receivable donations stay internal. For every dollar donated to the RRT, the PBCC donates $44 to its internal charities. Those $44 trigger a 25% government rebate, returning an extra $11 to the PBCC. In other words, for every dollar given to the RRT, the PBCC extracts over $10 in government subsidies via its internal giving. And that's not all. The RRT also paints all the PBCC's huge portfolio of about 1,000 gospel halls with its charitable magic, ensuring that these exclusive private religious clubs pay no property tax, a multi-million-dollar annual saving. Do you find this hard to believe? Don't take my word for it. Check out this 2022 article by Radio New Zealand.
And the title says, ex-Plymouth Brethren Christian Church members call for its charitable status to be stripped. 4 members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church are calling for it to be stripped of its charitable status, which allows its adherents to claim millions of dollars in tax breaks each year.
There's a link to the full article below, but we'll scroll down to the section that deals with the RRT. The NAF, National Assistance Fund, is the largest PBCC charity in New Zealand. It is purely for the benefit of PBCC members.
So the article goes on to say, in the last decade, NAF, or the National Assistance Fund, has received between 26 million and 62 million each year in donations, plus millions more from its investments. In 2019, donations totaled $61,936,429, which would yield tax rebates of around $20 million. So what does the National Assistance Fund actually do? It's a bit of a black box. There are no glossy brochures expounding its good works. Church members are told most of their cash goes towards educating their children through the Brethren's private school system, One School Global. In New Zealand, it is a network of 17 campuses with a roll of 1,536, which received just under 2.5 million, including GST, from the Education Ministry for the 2021 year. Some of the activities of the National Assistance Fund are more mysterious. According to its annual report, the NAF made a $30 million loan in 2018 to Sovereign Capital Trust. The trust companies for both organizations share some of the same directors. When asked about this loan by RNZ, the PBCC said it was an investment to ensure sustainable funding for its charitable work. But does this qualify as charitable? In Britain, the Plymouth Brethren had its application for charitable status rejected by the Charity Commission in 2012 on the grounds it did not meet the public benefit requirement of the law. Professor Peter Lynham, who has written extensively on Brethren history, said this was because in effect they were just spending the money on themselves. The Commission was also concerned about the Brethren's treatments of former members. There was a good case for religious bodies having some exemption from taxation, because religion ought not to be made more difficult, he said. But in the case of a church which only operates for its own members, that's the interesting puzzle about the story. Why are they entitled to tax relief? It is also a key element of New Zealand charities law that a charity must provide benefits to the public and not to private individuals or groups. The church was finally granted charitable status in Britain in 2014 after promising its actions towards ex-members would be mitigated by compassion and launching its first public charity, the Rapid Relief Team, which was quickly rolled out to other countries, including New Zealand. In 2020, New Zealand's Rapid Relief Team received just under $741,000 in donations. Meanwhile, the National Assistance Fund got over $34.6 million, more than the Red Cross's $28.2 million.
So there you have it. Everything we have said so far about the RRT confirmed by the New Zealand national broadcaster. Let's take that snapshot of the numbers for 2020. 34.6 million to the Brethren's own selfish use and 741,000 to their public benefit RRT. That's a ratio of $47 to themselves for every dollar of public benefit, or expressed as a percentage, just 2.14% of public benefit gives them the full tax rebate on the whole sum. A 25% tax rebate on $34.6 million gave the Brethren $8,650,000 from the Government of New Zealand in 2020. That's a very good return on investment for the $741,000 they put into RRT. Far from being a charitable organisation, the RRT is an obscenely profitable tax evasion scheme. Its mere existence enables the PBCC to siphon tens of millions in taxpayer money each year simply by taking money from its left pocket and donating it to its right pocket, garnering a 25% profit from the government in the process.
Chapter 6, Smoke and Mirrors.
We can see from the previous chapter that the real value of the RRT to the Brethren is the publicity it generates, not in the good that it does. If, for example, the RRT donated $1,000 to a cancer research centre, but there were no photos of giant-sized checks being handed over or news articles about the gift, as far as the Brethren are concerned, that is just wasted money. Therefore, it is in the best interest of the Brethren to maximise the public impact of every single thing that the RRT does, the biggest bang for their buck. And this is something they are extremely good at. As we saw at the beginning of the podcast, they will shamelessly take the credit on behalf of the cult for large donations that were actually made by governments or other charities. In this section of the podcast, we'll take a look at some of the extraordinary strategies the RRT use to dishonestly inflate their public image. Let's start with this 2018 Daily Mail article.
The title says, Charity promising to give 100% of donations to farmers caught out spending nearly half of public donations on employee expenses. Religious Drought Relief Fund called out for its 100% donation promise. The charity has been quizzed because of previous donations being spent on staff. The Rapid Relief Team is the charity of religious group, the Exclusive Brethren. RRT has advertised a $2.6 million Operation Drought Relief to fund hay and food. The group's website says RRT has committed 100% of every dollar to the farmer. Reports show previous donations went on wages, marketing, admin, and events. The article goes on to say, a charity associated with a controversial religious sect has been questioned about its promise to deliver 100% of its drought relief donations to farmers after having previously been caught spending donations on employee expenses. Rapid Relief Team, RRT, the charity arm of the Exclusive Brethren, was called out when it advertised a $2.6 million Operation Drought Relief to provide hay for livestock and food for drought-stricken farmers. The organization stated on its website it was raising funds for farmers and their families, but the promise was questioned due to charity's previous spending. While they stated they have committed 100% of every dollar to the farmer, previous reports showed they spent nearly half of previous donations on staff and marketing, the Sydney Morning Herald reported. The report showing that the charity's expenses for the same financial period were in excess of $1.2 million, including $135,000 being spent on marketing. The conservative religious sect has been extremely controversial in Australia because of previous allegations that it tried to influence politicians despite its members being exempt from voting, news.com.au reported.
As we have already pointed out, dishonesty is one of the hallmarks of the Brethren and of the RRT. But the point I want to focus on is that marketing spend. What was that used for? The answer is that the RRT spends hundreds of thousands of its tax-refunded income every year on top-tier public relations companies in order to extract the maximum publicity from its every act. Look at this client profile article by top Australian PR consultants, H Advisors Australian Public Affairs.
With 100% of New South Wales, Queensland, and Victoria declared in drought in 2018, the Rapid Relief Team, RRT, rallied to deliver hay and hope to regional areas. Established in 2013, RRT is an initiative of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church to combine the efforts of its volunteers into a single charitable organization. Operation Drought Relief delivered 6,000 tons of donated hay via plane, train, and automobile across the desert and over the sea, offering relief to farmers and their families. H Advisors APA provided extensive media support for the campaign, generating 451 pieces of media coverage, reaching an audience of nearly 28 million Australians. Additionally, we helped produce a feature-length documentary detailing the campaign and impact of the drought. Australian Public Affairs secured an agreement with Qantas, and the documentary was shown on all international and domestic flights for a 6-month period. Building on that success, Australian Public Affairs has continued to partner with the RRT to increase profile with key stakeholders in government, while amplifying their ongoing efforts around natural disasters such as the 2019 drought, the 2019 to 2020 bushfires, and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic.
451 pieces of media coverage and a full-length documentary shown on all Qantas flights for 6 months. That's pretty impressive. On the other hand, it probably burned half of the funds that were donated to help the drought-afflicted farmers. I think we should apply to Qantas to have the Get Alive podcast on all their flights, just to give some balance to their coverage.
I agree.
But note that line about increasing the RRT's profile with key stakeholders in government. That is the real objective, to make sure that the government tax authorities are constantly reminded of the huge public benefit of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Here's another client profile from a major PR business, Wells Haslam Strategic Public Affairs.
Wells Haslam had the pleasure of being involved in providing ongoing support to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's charity arm, the Rapid Relief Team, during 2015. The highlight of the year was the official launch near Hobart of 14 Tasmanian Fire Service tankers fitted with a revolutionary compressed air foam system. 6 of the tankers' CAFS systems were funded by a $166,000 donation from the Rapid Relief Team, RRT. The team's national coordinator, Daniel Alderton, spoke at the ceremony and handled media interviews with aplomb. His Wells Haslam media training clearly paying off. The event was covered by ABC TV, Win TV, the Hobart Mercury, Launceston Advocate, Burnie Advocate, Melbourne Herald Sun, and Brisbane Courier Mail. Wells Haslam's social media specialist, Madison Richards, has provided advice to the RRT around its efforts to raise its profile in the digital space. Following Maddie's advice, the RRT has split its original single Facebook page into 3, one for each of Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. It is also taken to Instagram and LinkedIn.
What can we say? Your generous donation has been used to train Dan Alderton in the fine art of handling media interviews with aplomb. Money well spent from the Brethren's perspective. Unfortunately for the RRT, their high-pressure tactics to gain public exposure can sometimes backfire, as it did in Winnipeg, Manitoba in 2021. A concerned staffer at a Winnipeg police station tipped off a journalist at Press Progress, resulting in the following article.
So the title says, Winnipeg police agreed to promote secretive and strict religious sect internal emails show. Experts say internal emails suggest a controversial religious sect sought to use Winnipeg police to generate positive publicity. The Winnipeg Police Service partnered with a benevolent community group on a charity food box program last year, despite questions raised by local media outlets about the group's parent organization, a secretive religious sect. Internal emails newly obtained by Press Progress through Freedom of Information show Winnipeg police not only agreed to give the group positive publicity, but police were repeatedly pressed by the group into using their social media channels to give them maximum exposure.
Here is one of those emails.
So it's from RRT North America, sent December 11th, 2020. Good morning, Bonnie. Rapid Relief Team has been working on the food box program for Winnipeg Police. We have increased our offering to 95 additional food boxes to what we have already donated, 135 food boxes total. Would you mind providing a plan of what you had in mind for the presentation of the second donation and how that will play out? Obviously, we would like maximum exposure for this event. RRT can potentially have some of our directors from the province present at the event as long as we have a few days' notice.
The article goes on to say,
Stephen A. Kent, a sociology professor at the University of Alberta, who studies new and alternative religions, said the email exchanges clearly demonstrate that the initiative was a publicity-rich charitable activity. The program fulfills the Rapid Relief Team's charitable mandate, Kent told Press Progress, noting it provides photo opportunities that enhance the group's image both to its own members and to an often critical public. The charitable donations are commendable, but former members still suffer from the group's uncharitable policy of having been withdrawn from their families and former friends who remain members, Kent said. University of Winnipeg criminology expert Bronwyn Dobchuk-Land said the email suggests RRT was anxious about publicity. What's really notable in the communications is how anxious they are about their public exposure, Dobchuk-Land told Press Progress. They revealed themselves to be primarily concerned with publicity in the context of their partnerships with the police and the distributions of these boxes.
So behind the scenes of every RRT initiative, there's an army of public relations professionals, social media specialists, trained spokesmen, cameramen and videographers consuming a large proportion of the charitably donated funds, but essential for the real objective of the Brethren, which has nothing to do with showing compassion and everything to do with securing multi-million-dollar tax credits. This single-minded focus on maximizing publicity is evident in every detail of every RRT operation. Here's a leaked internal RRT document being an instruction sheet for setting up one of their iconic red marquees and catering trailers for serving meals at events. If we zoom in on the very first item in the list of instructions on the right, we see Item 1, check with incident controller you are in the correct location. Aim for good exposure to media/public. And here's another internal leaked PBCC document, this time from a magazine published for Brethren members by the UBT. The article gave the key objectives for 2024 for each of the PBCC's various divisions. Here's what it says about the RRT. RRT, what are we striving for? RRT is striving for every locality active. How? One red tent event per locality globally each year. Every locality to distribute one of RRT's core products to an external entity. Every locality to engage with a person of influence or status at a local level. Copyright UBT Marketing Pty Limited. Nothing here in the Brethren's internal literature about helping humanity in their time of need. The RRT is directed to hold red tent events, distribute their conspicuously branded products, and engage with persons of influence and status. These directives lead to some strange results, where the RRT will often set up their red tents and serve coffee and burgers at public events without making any charitable contribution at all. They're purely there to be seen, photographed, and to meet persons of influence and status. To be clear, serving food to homeless people and impoverished refugees would certainly count as charity. But does serving free food to a prosperous and well-nourished crowd at a public event count as charity? Or is that just publicity? Here's a very recent example from April 2025 in the UK. Judge for yourself whether charity or publicity was the objective. Here are the headlines in the Doncaster Free Press.
So the first one says £16.8 million hospital suite launched with charity RRT serving barbecue meals.
Anyone just reading the headlines would think the charity had made some major contribution to the £16.8 million hospital suite. The article goes on to say,
volunteers from the Rapid Relief Team in South Yorkshire provided 400 free burger meals to NHS staff during the unveiling of the Montague Community Diagnostic Centre's new imaging suite. The £16.8 million imaging suite, completed in March 2025 after a year of construction, represents a significant investment in modern diagnostic services. Equipped with state-of-the-art MRI and CT scanning rooms, an ultrasound suite, and a welcoming reception area, the facility is designed to enhance patient comfort and reduce anxiety during procedures. The new imaging suite is expected to perform approximately 80,000 diagnostic procedures annually, significantly reducing waiting times and improving treatment pathways for patients across South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw. Doncaster Mayor Ros Jones was present to cut the ribbon and officially open the suite, marking a major milestone for healthcare in the region.
Just to be absolutely clear, the RRT had made no contribution whatever towards raising funds for the £16.8 million imaging suite. Their sole contribution was to turn up with a red tent to the opening ceremony, where conveniently a person of influence or status, Doncaster Mayor Ros Jones, was cutting the ribbon. And needless to say, there would be a media presence with cameras and video. No doubt Mayor Ros Jones and the other assembled dignitaries noticed the scarlet RRT branded tent with RRT branded bottled water and RRT branded coffee cups served by staff in RRT branded aprons and RRT branded caps. The burgers were served in RRT branded boxes, and just in case anyone was still in any doubt whatever where all this free food was coming from, even the burger buns themselves are branded, literally branded, with the RRT logo. But the cherry on the cake came with the official photos of the event. Here is the mayor, the hospital chief executive, hospital staff, and representatives of the construction company that built the imaging centre. And stepping in front of them all in a perfectly timed photo bomb is Rob Patterson, the Doncaster RRT team leader, strategically holding an RRT brochure in front of him for the cameras. At first glance, you might assume Rod Patterson is someone important. Perhaps he's the mayor of Doncaster, the lead architect of the new imaging centre, the hospital's chief executive, or even a major donor to the £17 million public health project. But he's none of these things. Rod Patterson is simply there for the photo op, representing the Rapid Relief Team on behalf of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, a church that will now bask in the reflected glory of a major public health investment, despite having contributed absolutely nothing to it. Congratulations to Rod Patterson and the Doncaster RRT team for executing a textbook photobombing operation. I'm sure your PR consultants are very proud of you.
Chapter 7, Bait and Switch.
If you are a very large, visibly intoxicated male wearing a wife-beater, combat boots, and death's head tattoos, you are very unlikely to succeed in thumbing a lift. If, however, you have a young and pretty girlfriend to do the thumbing for you while you hide behind a dumpster, you'll soon get a ride. This strategy is called a bait and switch, and it perfectly illustrates the relationship between the PBCC and the RRT. One thing that seems very strange about the RRT's highly conspicuous and abundant branding is that it doesn't mention the PBCC. There's a very good reason for this. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is socially and politically toxic. A Google search for news articles about the PBCC or exclusive brethren will turn up literally hundreds of headlines connecting the church with child sexual abuse, tax evasion, drink driving, misogyny, racism, covert surveillance and harassment of critics and former members, extreme homophobia, illegal political operations, and above all, a cruel culture of shunning and cutting off any member who breaks their strict and secretive rules. One of the very clever ways that the RRT gains both publicity and credibility is by partnering with major highly respected charities and with organisations such as police forces, hospitals and government departments. None of these would even consider partnering with the toxic PBCC. The reality is that in modern society, with its political correctness and cancel culture, very few people or organisations would want to either receive charity from or share a platform with such a notorious cult as the Exclusive Brethren. Enter the pretty girlfriend strategy. Let's look at an example of how this works in practice. Vinnie's CEO Sleep Out is a major annual Australian fundraising event to help the homeless. Thousands of business CEOs and also some MPs and other persons of influence spend one night sleeping rough on urban streets and collect money by sponsorships. The RRT has been supporting Vinnie's CEO Sleep Out for years by setting up its red tents and catering trailers to give the CEOs a hot breakfast for the morning after. Vinnie's CEO Sleep Out acknowledges RRT as a partner and national sponsor on their website and social media. They have taken the bait. Now here comes the switch. Check out this article from PBCC website togetherwearebrethren.com.au. Brethren Charity supports annual Vinnie's CEO Sleep Out, an initiative of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. PBCC, the RRT is staffed by church volunteers who provide catering services during a range of emergencies and charitable events. Lloyd Grimshaw from the PBCC said the Vinnie's CEO Sleep Out is an important event to raise critical funds and awareness for people experiencing homelessness. The partnership is now proudly and loudly proclaimed on the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's own website. Suddenly, there's no attempt to downplay the connection between the Brethren and the RRT. The apparently secular Rapid Relief Team is now openly praised as church volunteers by PBCC spokesperson Lloyd Grimshaw. Scroll through the PBCC's various websites and you'll find hundreds of similar posts, news blogs in which the RRT has supported a well-known charity, public event, police force or fire brigade. The action of an outwardly secular charity is cunningly reframed as a partnership with the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church itself. But this particular example is galling and painful for many in the ex-Brethren community. The Brethren's notorious doctrine of separation has destroyed thousands of families. For over 60 years, members who dared to disobey or question the church's hierarchy have been not just excommunicated, but physically cast out of their homes. Many of our Get a Life podcast episodes contain first-hand accounts of this cruelty. Former members, some as young as 14, forced to leave with nothing, estranged from their families, cast out onto the street and left to survive alone. So for the PBCC to now celebrate a partnership with a charity devoted to ending homelessness is not just deeply hypocritical, it also causes great pain and anger to former members who have experienced homelessness at their hands. This isn't accidental, it's part of a deliberate strategy. By selectively partnering with specific types of charities, especially those that highlight the PBCC's worst abusers, the RRT constructs an alternative narrative to counter the media exposure of their crimes. Which brings us on to our next chapter.
Chapter 8, Lipstick on a Pig.
Let's recap. The Brethren use a clever public relations strategy to discredit and deflect from the growing tide of public criticism of their cruel and antisocial practices. The goodwill and reputation of respected organizations are carefully laundered through the RRT and then reapplied as moral cover to a secretive and self-serving cult, the PBCC. We could call this reputation laundering. There are other names for this practice too: charity washing, corporate sanitizing, performative altruism, and most descriptively, turd polishing. The names of charities, services, and institutions that would never knowingly associate themselves with the PBCC are co-opted and abused, their virtue used to sanitize and legitimize a deeply harmful organization. Let's have a quick look at some of the loudest criticisms of the exclusive brethren and how they use the RRT to deflect those accusations. Number 1, oppression of women. The PBCC systematically disempowers women, denying them voice, agency, independence, and protection. They're forbidden from speaking in church and may hold only subordinate positions to men in business. They are expressly banned from holding any leadership positions in any church entity, including the RRT. Here is a complete list of all 52 directors of the RRT across the globe. They are all male. It is rather shocking then to find on the Brethren's website that PBCC volunteers are supporting the She Inspires event at Liverpool United football ground. Here's a local news article.
And the title says, Charity, the Rapid Relief Team helps empower young girls at Liverpool's She Inspires events.
And here is an article from the PBCC's own website.
And it's called She Inspires, a celebration of growth and teamwork. From December 11th to 12th, Plymouth Brethren Christian Church volunteers from the RRT in Liverpool reunited to support the She Inspires event, which was organized by the Merseyside Police Chief Constable and the Police Chief Crime Commissioner in conjunction with Liverpool, FC Foundation, and Everton in the community. The event is designed to empower students aged 13 to 14, both on and off the pitch.
Meanwhile, on the Liverpool Football Club's own website, it describes She Inspires like this.
She Inspires. By fostering confidence, leadership, and personal development, we are equipping participants with the tools and support needed to achieve their goals and become leaders in the communities.
How can the Brethren pretend to support an initiative to inspire girls to become leaders in their communities while explicitly forbidding women to become leaders in their community? We might add that the PBCC rules absolutely forbid participation in professional sports, so no Brethren child will ever play for Liverpool Football Club, regardless of how talented they are. 2. Suicide. The high control environment, religious guilt tripping, and enforced family separation in the Brethren are a potent recipe for suicide. Not content with providing ideal conditions for tragedy, PBCC leader Bruce Hales made headlines in the UK by actively promoting the idea that it would be better for a mentally ill church member to take poison and kill himself rather than continue to contact his sister who had left the cult.
And this is a picture of the article from the Times, and the title says, Defectors may as well commit suicide, says leader of sect. And underneath the picture, it says, the leader of a hardline Christian sect, which runs 34 schools in Britain, has suggested that followers consider leaving the group should kill themselves with rat poison or arsenic.
And indeed, there have been numerous tragic suicides in the cult, often triggered by the trauma of the isolation and shunning imposed on erring members. Now look at this article posted on the Brethren's own www.plymouthbrethrenchristianchurch.org website.
So the title says, RRT supports Are You OK Day. The Rapid Relief Team has served up almost 1,700 meals at Are You OK Day events around the country, including at Leeton Public School, Warwick High School, and Scottsdale High School, where students and teachers took time to check in on each other on the National Day of Action for Suicide Prevention. RRT volunteers had their signature burgers rolling off the grill as everyone talked about the importance of asking those close to them if they were okay. RRT Operations Manager Michael Dunn said Are You OK Day is an important reminder for everyone to reach out to family, friends, colleagues, and others in their lives to check in on them. In quotations, it says, of course, one of the best ways to stay in touch is to share a meal with someone, and RRT is so happy to be able to put on a breakfast or lunch to support Are You OK Day events.
The hypocrisy here is staggering. A central tenet of the Brethren's doctrine is that they will not share a meal with anyone outside of their own exclusive fellowship, and certainly not with a former member. To do so would be grounds for immediate excommunication. The article continues.
Are You OK? Is a national suicide prevention charity that encourages people to use their personal relationships and support networks to support family, friends, and colleagues. It encourages people to stay connected and have conversations that can help others through difficult times in their lives. For more information, visit www.areyouok.org.au. The Rapid Relief Team is the charitable arm of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Established in 2013, the RRT has more than 14,500 volunteers worldwide who support the community through charitable donations and events, as well as assisting emergency services in times of disaster and crisis by providing meals and other support.
Personal relationships and support networks, family, friends, and colleagues are all mercilessly ripped away from anyone who dares to defy PBCC leader Bruce D. Hales or break any of the cult's extreme rules. Would Are You OK really have accepted the RRT's partnership if they knew that it was the exclusive brethren that they were platforming? 3. Breaking up families. Look at this news article from Stuff in New Zealand.
The title says, Ex-exclusive brethren accuse church of tearing families apart. There are some pretty nasty stories. It goes on to say, former members of the exclusive brethren allege the secretive sect is breaking up families, putting members in isolation and attacking their livelihoods in order to maintain control. A chance remark to her adult daughter 3 years ago triggered a chain of events that has left a Christchurch woman and her husband estranged from 8 of their 9 children, 25 grandchildren, and wider family, and repeatedly hauled before the courts.
This is just one of hundreds of newspaper articles accurately accusing the brethren of using their doctrine of separation to break up families. So common is this extreme form of excommunication that the majority of current PBCC members would have close relatives, parents, siblings, children, uncles and aunts, whom they are currently and actively shunning. Imagine the anger among the victims of this cruel practice when they see this on the Brethren's website.
And the title says, RRT is bringing Christmas cheer this holiday season. Brethren Charity Rapid Relief Team is going global, donating over 5,500 Christmas food boxes to families in need around the world, just in time for the holiday season. RRT Operations Manager for Australia, Dan Alderton, said the RRT Christmas Food Box Initiative was simply about bringing families together for Christmas. As Christians, family is very important to us, and we want to do what we can to help bring families together, he said.
Let's just zoom in on that statement.
As Christians, family is very important to us, and we want to do what we can to help bring families together, he said.
Remember Dan Alderton? He's the guy who had the Wells Haslam media training to teach him to speak with aplomb. And there is another discordant note here too. Brethren don't celebrate Christmas. It's regarded as a pagan festival. And the PBCC regularly imposes a holiday travel ban in December to prevent its own members from reuniting with distant family members for Christmas. We could go on with hours, with example after example of the PBCC using the RRT and the goodwill of naive but well-meaning charities to patch the holes in the tapestry of lies that covers their true nature. But let's move on to something positive. Changes in the wind, and some institutions are now taking positive action to remove the parasitic RRT from their premises. Here's an example from the Fire Brigades Union, who represent about 36,000 firefighters in the UK.
So this is a letter from the Fire Brigades Union, year 2022, nominating section LGBT plus community. Conference notes with concern the increasing use by fire and rescue services of voluntary sector organizations to provide food and refreshments to members of the service attending prolonged incidents. Conference is concerned that some of these organizations do not uphold the core values of the fire and rescue services and their commitment to inclusivity. One such organization, Rapid Relief Team, RRT, were established by Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, PBCC. Research into PBCC reveals that they operate policies that exclude lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people from their membership, and that they have actively campaigned against LGBT equality. Conference believes it is wrong for our members to be expected to accept charity from people who do not share the values of inclusion and respect for differences.
That is a refreshingly clear and uncompromising stand. Did we mention before that the PBCC is intensely homophobic? Don't take our word for it. Here's an extract from the report of the New Zealand Royal Commission of Inquiry. Negative attitudes about diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. Negative perceptions of homosexuality created barriers to reporting. Pakeha survivor Craig Hoyle described the homophobia and transphobia present within the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Craig explained there was zero tolerance for diversity of sexuality or gender identity within the PBCC, and that homophobic and transphobic slurs were commonplace. Craig explained that anyone who deviated from cisgender heterosexuality was seen as a pervert, demon-possessed, or mentally unwell, and was subjected to harmful labels and put-downs. Craig, along with other PBCC members who were regarded as sexual perverts, were subjected to chemical castration medications administered by a PBCC doctor in an attempt to cure their homosexuality. We think the Fire Brigades Union is absolutely right not to accept charity from such a cruel and backwards cult. Here is another institution that has seen the light, South Australia Health, the health ministry for the state of South Australia. This is a 2024 article by ABC News.
And the title says, SA Health will no longer partner with charity run by Brethren members, by Brianna Fior. SA Health says it will no longer partner with an organization that is run by members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, following questions by the ABC. Former members have spoken to the ABC about the church's rules, views on women, and position on university attendance, describing it as a cult. The claim has been denied by the church, with a spokesperson saying it was a global Christian fellowship that lives peacefully amongst neighbors all over the world. Church members run a charity called the Rapid Relief Team, which supports emergency service workers.
This confirms our view that as soon as an organization understands that the RRT is actually the PBCC or exclusive brethren, as they should really be called, they want nothing further to do with them. Finally, a story about mental health charity Headspace in Geelong, Australia. Headspace is a great charity that specifically helps young people.
So Headspace Geelong supports young people from 12 to 25 who are going through a tough time. We can assist young people in 4 key areas. Number 1, physical health, including sexual health. 2, mental health. 3, alcohol and other drugs. 4, work and study support.
Headspace had taken the RRT bait and accepted a consignment of food boxes, unaware that they were really dealing with the Brethren, a cult with a horrific record of damaging the mental health of young people. not only by advocating suicide, as we have already discussed, but by their extensive institutionalized alcohol abuse, a drug that is pushed onto young Brethren members from childhood. Headspace put a post on Instagram to thank RRT for the consignment of food boxes. Ex-PBCC member Ben Woodbury, who was ejected from his family home when he came out as gay, saw the post and messaged Headspace, pointing out the moral and reputational damage they would suffer if the Brethren claimed them as a partner in helping young people with mental health issues. Here is Ben's message to Headspace. Hi there. As an ex-member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, I used to be forced to work in this charity, the Rapid Relief Team. On coming out gay to my family, I had many years of abuse at the hands of the members of this cult who tried to convert me to being straight. On escaping, I was then excommunicated and shunned, meaning my family and everyone I loved and knew had to pretend like I didn't exist. I still have nothing to do with my family 8 years later, and not without lack of trying on my part. I find it extremely disturbing to see an amazing charity like yourself working with this cult. Especially as you have queer community representation at Pride events. If you're needing any clarification as to my story or the validity of this cult, feel free to Google Exclusive Brethren Cult, or look at my TikTok videos at xcultboy, or visit at Get a Life Podcast on Instagram or YouTube to hear many other survivor stories. Within days, Headspace responded to Ben, removed their social media posts mentioning the Rapid Relief Team, and cut ties with them. A small victory perhaps, but a powerful reminder that one person speaking up can make a difference. If you've listened to this podcast and felt anger or outrage at the deception and harm caused by the RRT, please don't let that feeling go to waste. Turn your anger into action. Social media is a powerful tool. If you see a charity, school, or public institution promoting a connection with the RRT, do something simple. Leave a comment or send a message. Tell them politely but firmly that the RRT is not just a harmless aid group. It's a public front for the Exclusive Brethren, a secretive and abusive cult. No organization that values women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, access to education, or the right to love your own family should be aligning themselves with the RRT. You don't need to write an essay or cite sources. Just ask them to do a quick search on Google or ChatGPT about the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. That's often all it takes to open someone's eyes.
Chapter 9, The Fencing Fraud.
A clip from RRT's website. RRT donated over 75 kilometers of fencing to 250 cyclone-afflicted farmers, 20,000 posts and 25,000 battens. The convoy and event were organized by the Rapid Relief Team, gifting over 250 farmers from Hastings and the surrounding areas with more than 20,000 fence posts and fencing supplies to help them get back on their feet after Cyclone Gabrielle. And here is a clip from the RRT's 2023 New Zealand Annual Report. Major Initiative Report. RRT New Zealand gives a boost to over 3,000 farmers impacted by Cyclone Gabrielle. Kicking off events in Hawke's Bay, then moving through Gisborne, Wairoa, Waipukurau, and finishing up in Wellsford, RRT's dedicated volunteers donated fencing packs to 1,301 farmers, valued at $1,500 each, ultimately totaling $1.9 million. 1.9 million New Zealand dollars total donation value. The bait had been taken and now the switch. On the PBCC's own website, it is not RRT volunteers, it's Plymouth Brethren volunteers.
So it says Plymouth Brethren volunteers help rebuild fences for cyclone affected farmers. Cyclone Gabrielle tore through the Hawke's Bay region in New Zealand, leaving a massive destruction in its wake, including thousands of kilometers of broken fencing. Members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church quickly came together to support and loaded nearly 100 kilometers of free fencing onto a convoy of trucks to deliver to 300 impacted farmers.
The extraordinary generosity of the RRT was also, of course, reported on extensively by national media, along with pictures of the convoy of fencing trucks draped with RRT banners.
And this title says, Free Fencing Convoy Heads to RRT Farmers Event in Welsford. And for those that are listening, it's the convoy, and on the back of it are these massive banners that say, providing relief to farmers and their families, of course, with the RRT logo.
The message being promoted is simple and emphatic. The Rapid Relief Team donated $1.9 million worth of fencing supplies to help farmers affected by Cyclone Gabrielle. And this generosity, we're told, was thanks entirely to the compassionate spirit of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. So what's the problem? The problem is, that's not what actually happened. In reality, the RRT did not donate $1.9 million worth of fencing supplies. Here's the truth of the matter. About a year after the cyclone, when various government departments released their annual financial reports, a former PBCC member noticed something unusual. The New Zealand Ministry for Primary Industries had awarded a grant of $1.25 million to the RRT specifically for this fencing project.
And so this says, project funded to help the recovery of rural communities affected by severe weather in 2023. Projects funded under the NIWE Time Critical Primary Industries Recovery Fund. Rapid Relief Team, RRT New Zealand Limited, $1.25 million.
Digging further, they discovered that another major donor, the Evergreen Foundation, which has no connection with the PBCC, had also contributed significantly.
And in this, it says the RRT Farmer Connect Days. We supported the Rapid Relief Team with just over $173,000 to help them facilitate 4 Farmer Connect Days in Gisborne, Waiora, Hastings, and Central HB. Similar to the Hort Days, the focus was on providing fencing and other goodies to encourage pastoral farmers off their land, allowing them to mix with others in the farming sector. Approximately 300 farmers attended along with the industry advisors and guests. Over $173,000 to help facilitate Farmer Connect Days for farmers and industry advisors.
When the numbers were added up, it turned out that 1.423 million of the 1.9 million came from sources other than the PBCC. In fact, The PBCC's contribution amounted to just 25% of the total. And when you factor in the 25% tax rebate that the Brethren would have claimed on their portion, the net cost to them was likely around $358,000, not $1.9 million. So the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church contribute about $360,000 to the Cyclone Gabrielle fencing project, not the 1.9 million figure they've been promoting. Still, that's a substantial donation, right? Credit where credit is due. But hold on, there's more. An eagle-eyed researcher from Scotland spotted something interesting in one of the RRT's publicity photos. The boxes of fencing hardware being distributed were clearly branded BSN Fittings. That name might not mean much to the public, but it's significant. BSN Fittings is a PBCC-owned business operated by Michael Vidges of Gisborne, New Zealand. Their tagline, everything on the fence except wood. Our team dug into the standard costs of livestock fencing in New Zealand. For the common 8-wire post and batten fence, material costs typically break down as follows. $6 a metre for the posts and $7 a metre for the hardware, the wire, strainers, steel battens. In other words, everything but the wood. This means hardware accounts for about 54% of the total cost of materials. Now things start to look very different. The New Zealand government and the Evergreen Foundation gave a combined $1.425 million to the RRT for this fencing project. The RRT then spent an estimated $770,000 of that on fencing hardware with PBCC business BSN fittings. In other words, $770,000 flowed from the government and a non-Brethren charity straight into the Brethren's PBCC business ecosystem. Compare that to the Brethren's own contribution of just $358,000, and you'll see what this really was. A project in which the PBCC may have had zero net cost, or potentially even a profit, all while claiming public credit for a $1.9 million act of generosity. In Australia, we find the RRT playing exactly the same game. Rather than being a pipeline for the PBCC to donate some of their extraordinary wealth to people in need, it has become a tool to secure valuable government grants, which can then be spent with PBCC-owned businesses. Look at this 2024 article in the Sydney Morning Herald, for example.
The title says, "How much money the exclusive Brethren's ecosystem really makes." The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church's Hales family has clocked up a slew of new record-setting property sales as the Australian Tax Office continues its investigation. By Michael Batchelor and Lucy Mackin. September 20th, 2024. The RRT's most recent financial records show a cash surplus of $4.6 million. But this masthead can reveal the taxpayers have given it $680,000 via federal government grants since 2020. The grants bought mobile coffee machines, cooking equipment, lighting towers, and other equipment. The largest grants of up to $22,000 each were paid under the Commonwealth's Stronger Communities scheme. The Rapid Relief Team primarily gives food and drink to emergency workers at the sites of natural disasters. The taxpayer-funded grants, most made under the Morrison government, came after local MPs invited Brethren members to apply for them.
Let's pause for a moment and just take in how extraordinary this really is. In the first 3 chapters of this podcast, we showed that the Rapid Relief Team exists primarily to enable the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church to benefit from the 25% tax rebate offered on charitable donations. Every year, the PBCC funnels hundreds of billions of dollars through its ecosystem, and the RRT, operating on less than 2% of the total, guarantees the tax-free status of the whole. In short, it's a vast and sophisticated tax avoidance scheme, quietly stripping millions in revenue from the public purse. And now, to make matters worse, this same scheme is being rewarded with millions more in government grants. Not content with raking in millions in undeserved tax rebates, the PBCC is now receiving direct taxpayer funding for their self-promotional projects. What exactly is the government thinking? It's like watching a smash and grab raid on a jewelry store. And as the thieves sprint off with handfuls of diamond necklaces, the shop owner chases them down the street, offering them the cash register and his wallet as well. Before we move on to our conclusion, let's finish this chapter with a bit of comic relief. An iHeartRadio interview with Danny Blampede, the director of RRT New Zealand, in which he is quizzed about the RRT's Cyclone Gabrielle fencing project.
12 minutes after 7 here on Gold Sport. There is a very, very big event coming up in Welsford on Thursday, the 30th of this month, to hand out fencing to farmers hit by Cyclone Gabriel. Now, this follows a successful event that was held in Hastings, in Gisborne, Wairoa and Waipukara over the last couple of months. Danny Blampy joins us this morning. Danny, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
How are you? Where are you?
Today I'm in Northland, and yes, I'm well, thank you.
All right, let's talk about this event, because you've held similar events, haven't you? I think we may have spoken about them a few months back for the Hastings Gisborne region.
Yes, we did. We've held 4 of these successful events, and after such a lot of good feedback from the farming community, we've decided to have one in Northland, in Rodney.
I think the numbers are amazing to date. Before even this event coming up on the 30th of this month, your charity's donated something like 930 fencing packs valued at over $1.4 million to farmers.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, it's certainly a lot of money, but I think the best part about it is just seeing the farmers come out and chat to each other and getting back together. It's a real honour to be involved.
The stats are amazing. I mean, I think that's something like 980 kilometres of fencing wire and over 2,000 meals as well. So you really are looking after the farmers.
Yeah, we're doing our best. And as I say, they're a great group of people, and they need to be looked after.
Right. This next event, as I said, it's dated for the 30th of November. Between now and then, what are you doing?
So between now and then, we're asking farmers in that region, that's the Kaipara region, right up to Dargaville, through Helensville and those areas that have been hit by Gabrielle, to go on to either our website, that's RRT Global /NZ, or our Facebook page, and register. And they register for the free fencing packs. Then they can come along on the 30th and pick them up and have a feed, a free burger. We'll have our services there, mental health services, police, fertiliser companies, just supporting them and getting them off their farms and getting them to collaborate with one another. So it's an excellent day.
Obviously, you get a lot of support from sponsors and people like that who are supplying you with the battens and the wire and so on.
Correct. Yes, we have a lot of providers that have helped us out with it, given us excellent preferential pricing, etc. And our service providers, like I've spoken about, the police, etc., that come along. We coordinate it, and our volunteers are there just to serve these people.
So, are there any special names that are backing you? Because this is an expensive exercise when you think about it. The value of the last lot you handed out, $1.4 million.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's a big shout out to all our service providers. You've got Rabobank, as I said, the police. We've had various mental health services come along from different communities, and then we try and bring it all together, have our tent up and welcome in the farmers on that short period of time and load them up, send them on their merry way.
The dishonesty is just staggering. The RRT had received $1.25 million from the government for this project and a further $173,000 from the Evergreen Foundation, but somehow this had just slipped Danny's mind when he's asked, are there any special names that are backing you? The man's a pathological liar.
Chapter 10, The Big Picture.
When we set out to create this podcast, we knew there would be criticism. After all, we're scrutinising a charity, the Rapid Relief Team, that at the local level has often done good work. Communities that have received help from the RRT may understandably feel uncomfortable or even upset that we're questioning that work. But to understand why it is necessary to hold the RRT accountable, we need to step back and look at the big picture, especially when it comes to public benefit and taxpayer money. Governments exist to serve their citizens. They collect taxes from individuals and businesses and use that money to fund services for the public good: hospitals, schools, roads, disaster relief, pensions, disability support, scientific research, national defence, and more. In short, tax money exists for the public benefit. Yes, we may criticise our governments, But public taxation and public spending are the very foundation of a functioning society. Imagine life without them. To qualify for tax exemption or to offer tax rebates to donors, an organisation must serve the public good. That's the deal. So what does the RRT do? By selectively spending less than 2% of the PBCC's hundreds of millions of dollars in annual tax-exempt income, the RRT secures tax exemption for the entire operation. In doing so, it deprives governments of tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue, public money that could otherwise be used for healthcare, disaster response, or education. And what do they offer in return? A handful of high-profile, media-centric events designed not to solve public need at scale, but to generate maximum public visibility. Giant red marquees, convoy trucks draped in banners, and walls of logos are all staged for the camera, and all serve a far more strategic purpose than compassion. They're there for public relations, brand sanitization, and tax evasion. So let's ask the real question. Does the RRT provide a net benefit to society, or is it in truth a net drain on public funds? Once we cut through the billboard banners and empty slogans, the truth is hard to ignore. Behind the polished image of the RRT lies a secretive and deeply exploitative cult, the Exclusive Brethren, using selective charity, public goodwill, and government loopholes to fuel a tax-free empire that is currently holding more than $1.3 billion in cash in its numerous internal own benefit charities and tax-exempt trusts.
The RRT does not serve the public. It undermines it. It provides no net public benefit. In fact, it is a net public detriment, costing governments more than 10 times what it gives. Put simply, without the RRT, the world would be a better place.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.